financial literacy, and the human condition. Welcome to Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Rayam.
Welcome to Financial Fitness. I'm Jess Tyler, along with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Rayam. Good morning.
Good morning, Jess. How are you?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to this show because it's our question show.
Wait, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Is
For once I get to be the master.
Is it ever going to stop raining?
Probably not. But it's May Day. May Day. We're in May now, so I'm excited that we are getting closer to summer. Looking forward to summer. I don't know why I don't have like a big vacation plan, but I'm looking forward to summer.
Oh, me too. I mean, anybody in New England is probably looking forward to it. So I'm looking forward to these questions.
Yeah, they might help you be able to take a summer vacation. All right, let's start off with David. And this is kind of a general question. He wants to know, what is the best long-term investment?
David, wow. Okay. Well, let me just pick one. So you know what I'm going to say. It would be better for me if I knew anything more about David, how old he is, what his goals are, all of that. Best is a relative term. The best long-term investment for one person may not be for another. But
maybe we could break it down. Maybe we could break it down to like if you were in your 20s and 30s versus if you're in your 40s and 50s.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is I hate to, give these sort of double talk answers when I'm really trying to give you information. So,
yeah.
So, with my disclaimer that this is not investment advice, since I don't really know anything about David, I'll give you some general parameters. Long-term investments in general, when you say the best long-term investment, I think if he's young, he may be thinking about, I can tolerate some risk. So would my best long-term investment be stocks? Would it be mutual funds? So if he's very young, he might be able to tolerate some risk, 20s to 30s, that sort of age group can certainly tolerate some risk. Doesn't mean you have to take it, right? But it means you can tolerate it. In other words, you can maybe invest in a well-diversified stock portfolio or a group of mutual funds, which by their very nature are already diversified. If you don't know what a mutual fund is, if you think, well, it's a Fidelity mutual fund, that means I own Fidelity stock. No, it means that Fidelity has put a bunch of things together, or a John Hancock, or anybody that does a mutual fund has put a bunch of different kinds of investments in the fund so that they are automatically diversifying that. And mutual funds are run by a fund manager who usually takes a cut of what your assets are under, what his assets or her assets are under management. So if they do well, they make more money. If they don't do well, they make less. Now, you might say, well, that sounds great. They've got skin in the game. I'm going there. But a mutual fund manager really doesn't care much about your $10,000 in general. Maybe some do, but, they care about the overall portfolio for which they're taking a cut, sometimes 0.25%, sometimes more. And the fund may charge you, a 1% fee or 1.5% management fee, something like that. There are no-load mutual funds also that don't have those kinds of fees, but are way too detailed to get into right now. But for a long-term investment for somebody in their 20s or 30s, stocks, mutual funds, things of that nature may be good. Real estate might be good. If you have time to sit on it until another time when the market is better, or the increase in the asset is higher, and then execute a sale, then you can handle a long-term investment. If you're in your 40s or 50s, your long-term investment might be something more like an annuity or a CD or, bonds, or something that's a little more conservative, mixed with some of those other things we talked about. And if you're at retirement age, then although you may have enough money to tolerate some losses in a stock or a mutual fund portfolio, that's a time when you might want to shift more toward something like annuities, CDs, bonds, whatever might be fairly safe in the market at that time. We talk a lot about fixed indexed annuities because they're a fixed product. In other words, they have guarantees, but they still have earnings linked to the market. So you don't have the downside potential that you would have with a mutual fund or stock portfolio, but you have some upside potential that can be very competitive. I hope that gives him some answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the answer was going to be real estate, so I feel vindicated that at least that was mentioned in there. I was kind of a little bit in there.
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of things that are good long-term investments. It depends on how well you buy them and how well they're suited to you and when you
Mhm.
plan to liquidate them. So if Dave wants more detail, if he gave me more detail, I would be more specific for him for sure. But I like the question. I'm glad he asked. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, well, the next one you kind of touched on this one. This is from Erica in Northampton. What is the difference between an annuity and a CD? And I got this a couple times.
Oh, really?
We kind of did a whole episode on this, which was really good in explaining it with a guest, I believe.
Yeah, I think we did. I just want to take this moment to say to people, I don't know these questions in advance. My favorite thing about these shows is that I never know the questions. I don't even know the categories of the questions. You just collect them. If anybody
Mhm.
wants to write in with a question, jtyler@whmp.com, and then you spring them on me, and I love it. It's like one of my favorite things to do. Okay,
Well,
so
what's
the
so funny
difference.
too is that when I get the questions, I try to answer them in my head to see if I'm anywhere close. And I've got about a 25% win rate.
All right, you're doing pretty well. Good. Okay.
Not so much.
The difference between a CD and an annuity. Okay. So
Mhm.
first of all, lots of different kinds of CDs and lots of different kinds of annuities. But in general terms, the word annuity comes from the word annual. So it's designed at some point to give you some kind of annual income. Doesn't mean you have to take income from it. You might just draw interest, or you might take your RMDs, required minimum distributions, if it's an IRA. You might make withdrawals. You might take the whole thing out at once when it's past a surrender charge period. But there are some things they have in common. So a CD and an annuity will both probably have some kind of surrender charge. Now, they may be called a penalty or a fee, but what that means is if you take the money out early, before the contract is
Mhm.
matured, whether it's a CD or an annuity, you're probably going to suffer some kind of a penalty. An annuity
Okay.
will usually have something called a free withdrawal clause on it. So maybe per year, they're all different, but maybe per year you could take, let's say, 10% of your balance out without a penalty. You only pay the penalty on anything over that. Okay. An
Mhm.
annuity, by its very nature, is tax deferred. A CD is not unless it's an IRA. So one of the main differences between an annuity, there are lots, but one of the main differences between an annuity and a CD is that enjoyment of tax deferral, whether you want it or you don't, right? If you don't want your tax deferral, if you don't care, you don't mind paying taxes on your money as you earn it, a CD might be the right thing for you if it's a good fit. If you want
Mhm.
to grow your money as if it were an IRA, even if it's not, then you could use an annuity to do that, because while the money is in there growing, there's no tax on it. So instead of earning a dollar and sending 30 cents to the government, you get to make money on the whole dollar, which is the power of
Mhm.
tax deferral. That's why people do IRAs. But you can't just create an IRA with, let's say, $100,000 from the sale of your house. There are rules against that. So if you want
Mhm.
tax deferral on that money, an annuity might be a way to do it. Now, a CD is often designed, most CDs are pretty simple. You put the money in the bank, they pay you a certain interest rate for a period of time, done deal, like a high yield savings account would be, with the exception of an early withdrawal penalty or fee. An annuity, you can put lots of different kinds of riders on. For instance, you could put an income rider on it depending on the product, and that might mean that at some point in the future, you can draw a lifetime income, an income that you
Mhm.
can't outlive, regardless of what the market does. Some annuities have bonuses up front, 10, 15, 20, 30% bonus right up front on the contract. Um, they might have other kinds of riders, like something called a first to die rider. If either spouse dies, you can get out of the contract instantly without any surrender charges. Yeah, I could
Mhm.
go on and on and on. One of the main differences can be that an annuity avoids probate automatically. Whoever the beneficiaries are on the annuity get the money regardless of what your will says. You can do something
Okay.
similar to that in a CD with beneficiaries, but many people never put beneficiaries on their CDs. So
Going back to the tax deferral thing real quick, it seems like if you do the math, if you're doing the tax deferral and that full amount of money is growing each time, what is the benefit of not doing tax deferral? Because some people obviously must do that. Why would you want to pay the taxes now and have less money grow? Does that make sense?
it makes sense. I think that's the same argument as, do you Roth your IRA or do you not? Do you pay the taxes now or later? And I think the
Mhm.
simplistic answer is, well, I'm going to pay the taxes sooner or later anyway. Why not pay them now? Or people will say, well, I'm going to be in a higher tax bracket later on, so I want to pay them now. If your taxes are going up that's what taxes do. They go up. But you have to remember that you may be at retirement not in a higher tax bracket. You might be in a lower tax bracket. So the answer is one of, accounting really. For most people, I think the enjoyment of tax deferral can be a great thing. Now you could also have an annuity that's a Roth IRA, So there's so many different kinds. There are fixed annuities, there are fixed indexed annuities, there are variable annuities. I mean, the list goes on and on. The one that I will say I use only very, very sparingly and only in the case of an emergency is something called an immediate annuity. And that's the kind people seem to know the most about, where you just dump your money in and it gives you an annual stream of income, and that's it. You've given up control of the money for the income. I would not recommend using that unless there's some urgent reason it has to be done. Otherwise, I would rather let the money grow and take it out when you need it.
Yeah. Would you say that one of them, a CD or an annuity, is better for a small sum and one's better for a large sum, or would you not break it down that way?
That's a good question. So many annuities, it's a very good question. Many annuities have a minimum deposit of, some have 5,000, but most of them have 10,000 or 25,000 minimum. So if you're somebody who's investing a few $1,000s, then a CD might be just what you need. Also, if you need short-term liquidity, like let's say you only want to tie this money up for 6 months or a year, then a CD is a much better deal for you than most annuities, which have longer term. So as Dave asked, what's the best long-term investment? I would say an annuity might be one of them, depending on your needs. Yeah. Good questions.
We're gonna get to some more questions coming up, and I want to get your phone number though, because like you said, a lot of these questions you can generally answer, but you need some specifics to give the best advice.
Absolutely. They can reach us at 413-773-3333.
Or you can visit hugyourmoney.com. We'll be right back with part 2 of Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Frances Ram, coming up on WHMP. Welcome back to Financial Fitness. I'm Jess Tyler, along with the Money Doctor, Dr. Frances Ram, on one of our favorite shows. We're answering listener questions.
We are. And so Dave and Erica will both be getting a copy of the book for writing in with questions that we used on the air. So I appreciate that. And of course, I would extend to them the offer to just call me, and I'll be happy to answer them more specifically. So it's really fun. I love these shows because I never know what the questions are, and they're varied. And sometimes they involve, relationships. I don't know if we have any of those questions today, but sometimes they're things like, I racked up a bunch of debt and my spouse doesn't know. How do I tell them? Yeah.
All right. The next one comes from Sam in East Hampton. What are the biggest mistakes people make when investing in the stock market?
Ooh, okay. Number one, not watching their money.
Okay.
Not watching their money. The average person invests in the stock market, usually through a broker, but even on their own. And they watch it for a little while closely, and they see it go up and down, and they get nervous and they get happy and all of that. But then other things take over and they just don't log in, or they say, I got a person who watches that for me, so I don't worry about it. So I would say that's the number one thing, is to not look at it. I would say second would be to not diversify. People tend to fall in love with a stock, which is going to be number 3, by the way. So people tend to fall in love with a stock and they say, I want Disney because I know Disney and Disney's always great. So I would say that's a big mistake, to not get a diversified portfolio that includes a number of different kinds of stocks. In other words, don't buy all tech stocks. Don't buy all oil stocks, right? Diversify so that you can, when the market is going up in one sector and down in another, then you can benefit from that. And I should mention, I'm not a stockbroker, so this is about the mistakes I see people make. Number 3 maybe should have been the first one, but is getting emotionally attached to your stock. You think, oh, I love this stock. I have great faith in this company, and this company's going places. And, no matter whether it's sinking or swimming, you're just happy to own that stock. Be careful about that. And some of these things are worse when you're a short-term investor than they are when you're a long-term investor. So one of the long-term things that you can tolerate, that you can't really tolerate well as a short-term stock investor, is having an exit strategy. If you're trading short-term or buying stocks for the relatively short term, let's say a year or less, maybe even 2
Okay.
years or less. And you don't
Mhm.
have a stop loss or a real exit strategy where you say, okay, if this goes in the other direction, I'm cutting my losses at $26.09 or whatever. You need to be very specific when you get in my opinion, to how you're getting out. Otherwise, what happens is people just hang on for the ride month after month, week after week, waiting for this stock to come back because the market always comes back, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes those stocks sometimes they become penniless or penny stocks, I mean. So I think you have to watch all of those things. Maybe not looking for the right advisor, just like haphazardly, somebody comes to you and says, I've got some stock to invest in, give me some money and I'll invest it. That wouldn't be how I would invest. I go and find a good broker who has a good reputation, get some referrals, give them a small amount of money, see how they do, stay in touch with them. But I'll tell you this one golden rule: no one will watch your money like you will. I don't care
Yeah,
how
how
nice
true.
they are. I just don't care. I mean, they're busy, right? And so a lot of the brokers have sort of these, check the box. Okay, here's the portfolio we give, and it's sort of cookie cutter, and we give it to everybody. And then that's how they manage a book, because they can't manage, 500 people individually. So I hope those are some of the biggest mistakes people make when they're investing in the stock market. I hope some of that is helpful. Yeah.
Would you
Sam.
say that when you were talking about checking it often, how much is enough and how much is excessive? Like
Okay.
like once a day, once a week, once a month?
Depends on the stocks.
Okay.
If you're really day trading or you're really looking at things, you might even be trading before the market opens or after the market closes and be done. If you're trading, longer term, you might want to look at it, once a week, once a month, once a quarter. Some people will check it every day just to get a feel. I think that's a good idea, is to learn how the stock moves. Is it moving in a channel? Is it, does it spike up or down? What causes it to move? So that you can be a more informed investor. Gee, when gas price is up, my stock is down. I should pay
Yeah.
attention to that. Next time I see gas prices up, I should maybe check my stock, right? Those kinds of things are very, very valuable. Know what you own. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Next question. We've got this one from Lisa in Williamsburg. I've saved $1,000. Where is the best place to put it?
Good job, Lisa. Good job. I wish I knew how old she was, but I don't care. I'm just happy that she's saving. So saving $1,000, depending on what she needs it for, and I'm going to guess that this should be emergency cash reserves, and she's going to continue to save. A lot of times people will save for something. So they'll say, I'm saving it for a car or whatever, but then they don't build an emergency cash reserve, and they end up in credit card debt because they overextended themselves. So the first thing she should do, I think, is to earmark that for emergency cash reserves and continue to save until she has whatever she considers to be a healthy emergency cash reserve. I don't abide by the, you must have, 6 months savings, 3 months savings, bill pay, because people can tolerate different amounts of risk. But once she's got that, or even now, a good place to put it where she would have high liquidity and still decent earnings is probably a high yield savings account or a money market account. And in this market, I just opened one for 5.55%. So you can do pretty well for short-term liquidity, money that you want to be liquid. At the point where she builds that up. Yeah, don't just leave it in your
savings account.
Well, not unless your bank is paying you a good rate of interest. Now, getting 4.5 at your local bank that you know and you're happy with, where it's very convenient to move the money, might be worth that rather than getting 5.5 someplace that you don't know, right? So yeah, I think she should just ask her local bank to begin with, hey, how can I make more money on this? But I would not say mutual funds or anything yet. If she doesn't have cash reserves, if all she's saved is $1,000, I want her to keep working on that and keep it safe, but try to earn some money on it. At the point where she gets past emergency reserves, and now she's starting to save money that she wants to invest. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, she has to have $5,000 in emergency reserves. I don't know. When she gets past that, let's say she builds up another 4 or 5,000 or 10,000. That's a time to start looking for, where can I actually, I would say, invest it, meaning something other than a savings. Where can I make more money on it? How can I protect it? How can I grow it further? Yeah.
Okay. So again,
Cash
that's a
reserves
specific
first.
one though. My answer was under the mattress, so that's not a good spot.
Well, no, no. But it brings up a point. Sometimes people will keep cash in their safe at home. And this might
Mhm.
sound silly, but and a little paranoid, but if you're going to put your cash in your safe, do me a favor. Please put it in a Ziploc bag and then put it in the safe. Because if you have a fire, and I know you've heard me say this before, if you have a fire and they come and douse your house with water, the fire
Mhm.
may not have bothered your money, but the water will. So if you
Got it.
really must put your money in a safe, please put it in a Ziploc bag. But yes, I would prefer that it's not under the mattress or in your safe.
Okay. By the way, we are answering listener questions. If there is a question that you want, we're going to be doing more of these shows in the future. So you can send it in to info@hugyourmoney.com or to me here at jtyler@whmp.com. And if we use the question in the show, you're going to get a copy of the book, which is right behind you.
Oh, retire debt and retire well. It is. Yep. Retire
And I believe
sooner,
you
live better. I'm
Perfect.
sorry.
All right. Next question is, what is my maximum debt to income ratio I can have to still qualify for a mortgage?
Oh, I like it. Who's this from?
This is from Jim, and this is from Southampton.
Great. Oh, so a little bit will depend on the bank, whether you're working with a mortgage broker or a local bank or a big box bank. But in general, I like to see it at 36% or less, which is what the banks always used to go by, right? They used to say 36%. Let's define that for people. Your debt to income ratio is your monthly payments in debt against your gross income. And so people get that confused quite a bit. That's your income before taxes and deductions. So if you have
Okay.
$100,000 a year coming in before taxes and deductions, let's say you have a $100,000 salary, you can be paying no more than $36,000 out in monthly payments, right? Over the course of the year,
Okay.
So $3,000 a month, right?
I'm doing
But
fast math in my head here as you're saying it.
I'm sorry, yeah, $100,000 salary, $3,000 a month in debt payments would put you at a 36% debt to income ratio. I like that ratio. I like to see less than that. It's from experience of working with clients for the last 15 years, watching when they can pay their debts and still tolerate a surprise car expense, and when they can't manage to buy popcorn to go to the movies. So 36% or less, I like. However, as home prices have become more expensive and credit cards have eaten up more of people's salary and childcare and everything else has gone up, banks have had to become a little more aggressive about lending for mortgages. And so most banks now will lend at 42, even 43% debt to income ratio. So I don't love that. I know it will get you into a home and I know you'll be okay for a while, but I also know that at that level, money is tight and you will not be able to tolerate surprise expenses. They will end up on credit cards. Credit cards will give you credit at, 50, 55, 60% debt to income ratio. They don't care. They're getting 29% until you default.
Right.
So try not to let yourself get buried. So to qualify for a mortgage, yes, you could probably even have 42 or 43%. To be able to pay it and live a decent lifestyle, I would like you to have no more than 36% debt to income ratio. Yeah.
Okay. And I think we have time for one more question. This one is from Betty and Emerson. It's kind of on a similar housing question, I would say. She says, is it smart to keep renting with the price of houses right now, or am I just throwing money away every month?
Oh, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
Yeah, short term, you can look at it and say, no, it's not, rent is really high, but so are house prices, and I should trade in my rent for a house price. But where I think you might win the game is when house prices start to go down because your rent isn't going down with them. So when house prices start to go down, not unless you got some unusual landlord who said, my house is worth less money now, so I'll charge you less rent. But I've never seen that happen. So at the time when houses become more affordable, because you have to remember that renting is a short-term financial obligation and buying a house is a long-term financial obligation. So to clarify this a little bit, if you're trading in $2,000 a month in rent for $2,000 a month in a mortgage, that might seem logical right now. Oh, I'll build equity and all of that. But you are saddling yourself with that $2,000 a month in a mortgage on a long-term investment whose value may decline. Now,
Mhm.
everybody thinks real estate always goes up. In general, it's on an upward trajectory, but that doesn't mean it's always up. So let's say that you trade that in. Okay, let's give you a scenario on both sides. You're renting for $2,000 a month. Something happens and you can't afford your rent any longer. What do? You
You
go
move out.
you find a less expensive apartment, you move home with your family, whatever. You're done. There's no long-term obligation there. The landlord isn't coming after you unless you break a lease, right? I'm talking about a month-to-month rent right now. If, you're done. But if you're in a house and you can't afford that payment because something changes, now you're looking at foreclosure, legal costs, all of that. So
Mhm.
you might say, well, I'm going to sell my house. Well, that might be a solution, but what if the market has declined and you can't get
Mhm.
as much money out of your house as you just paid for it a year, 2 years, 3 years ago? That's when there's a real problem. So I like there to be some wiggle room. I do approve, if I can use that word, of owning homes, right? I think you do build
Mhm.
equity. I think you do have some security, but they also come with some expenses that you aren't considering in rent, such as taxes, real estate taxes, and
Mhm.
repairs and homeowners
Yeah.
insurance. So, very often people do that sort of simple comparison. I'm paying this in rent. I could be paying that in a mortgage. You could,
Right.
but you might also have to consider those other expenses I'm talking about. Now, if she could wait a little bit until housing prices decline, and they'll go down again, right? If she can wait till housing prices drop and tolerate her rent for the moment, then she could trade in her high rent for possibly an equal or lower mortgage and use
Mhm.
that to her advantage. But in the meantime,
Yeah,
is she throwing money out the window? Yeah, well,
yeah, I always hear that
debatable.
term too, and I think that on the flip side, people feel like even with the repairs and the taxes and all that, at least you own something at the end of it versus not owning anything. But I guess it just depends what situation you're in, whether it's worth it or not.
And if you can pay for it.
Right.
Sometimes people
For
get
it.
into these homes because they look good on paper right then and there. And sometimes
Hmm.
people even do that intentionally. Look, we both have great jobs right now. We're planning to change our jobs. We're going to make less money. Let's get that mortgage now while we can qualify.
Right.
What are you qualifying for? You're qualifying to be in over your head when you change your jobs, you know?
Hmm.
So be conservative when you're trying to get a mortgage because I promise you, mortgages are long term, 20, 30 years for most people. With us, they're usually about 8 or 9 years when we add in all their debt and pay it off, which it tends to change those decisions for the positive. But, be conservative because there will come a time when money gets tighter for some reason, and you need to be able to survive that. So, in addition to getting a mortgage that you can afford, certainly build up cash reserves, as I think it was Erica that asked about the $1,000.
Mm.
Certainly build up cash reserves so that you can tolerate those kinds of expenses and surprises and expect real estate taxes to continue to go up.
I've got to tell you, just before we end the show here, I thought of you last night because I was watching a house hunter, speaking of this topic, and it was a husband and a wife. And of course, they were asking what the budget was, and the husband said 800,000, and the wife said 1 million. And
I love those shows.
the husband said, and this made me think exactly. I was like, oh my God, this is money, doctor. He said, just because we are approved for it doesn't mean we need to spend it. And I
That's
thought
right.
of you immediately.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah. Yeah, they're going to approve you for as much as they can or pre-approve you for as much as possible because their job is to write these loans. I'm not trying to make them out to be villains, but that's their job, right?
Yeah.
Look at the numbers and say, this is the most you can afford. And they do say, this is the most we will pre-approve you for, which is not necessarily approval. But people take that and say, wow, we've got approved for a lot more than we thought we could afford. And off they go shopping.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. I thought of you though
Careful.
immediately. All right, let's get your phone number for anyone that's got specific questions.
Thank you. It's 413-773-3333.
And you can always go to info@hugyourmoney.com. We'll be back next week with another edition of Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Ram.
So if you want to get your questions answered on the air, the simplest way to do it is to write into J Tyler. That's the letter J, Tyler, at WHMP.com. I will not know what the questions are. Jess will keep track of them and spring them on me in our next question show. And if we use them on the air, you'll get a copy of our book, Retire Debt and Retire Well, for free. And if you want to just write to us with general questions and you don't care if we answer them on the air, we will answer all your questions. The email is info@hugyourmoney.com.